Okay, so you guys all had like a lot of good wonderings. It was very hard to choose which ones. Like, I only have like 15 minutes to like talk about what I want to talk about. So the first one I'll kind of look at is, so the term Indian that I used earlier. One question was, Indian, is this name or term acceptable in all now, or is it more for Mohawk or younger people? Or question mark. So, as I said before, this is my personal story, and I'm just going to say that I personally have no issue with being called an Indian. It's part of that journey of reclaiming that word for myself and using it in my identity to rebrand it, as with many younger people, but not all. I'm not saying that the Indians, I'll use it, up north would like to be called so. Maybe they have a different term that they'd like. Aboriginal, Indigenous, Native. You know, it's really up to you to be able to kind of voice that concern and ask that question, you know, how would you like to be addressed? You know, is it suitable to address you in this way? And I'll kind of give an explanation as to why the term Indian does not hold the same effect on me as it would some people in the older generation or even my own generation. So politically, and it does get political with this term is used in the agreements that the Queen has with my people. She refers to us as the Indians. She does not say Indigenous, she does not say Aboriginals, she does not say the Natives. The Indians of Canada, that is how she refers to us. Changing that name and saying I'm now Indigenous, not Indian, I'm Indigenous or I'm Aboriginal, that nulls that treaty or that agreement that is had between the two of us. Because not only are we just below the Queen, we are allies with her. Okay, there's no one that's higher than the other, we're equal. She called on us, she called on the Mohawks in history to fight alongside her and her men in her wars, and we did so. We became allies with her. So this term, going back to those agreements, she says, oh, well, they're no longer Indians. They're Indigenous. Those agreements are gone. So then it becomes a conflict. And being, culturally appropriate and everything, it does come into play. I will take offense to it if somebody uses it as a racial slur. It's all in how you present yourself. It's all in how you're going to use that term. You know, if you want to say savage Indian, then it'll be like, okay, hold on. No. And someone said the fact that the term Indian is the preferred term. Again, just to me, some other individuals, I'm not saying that every native that you meet is going to be, wanting to be called an Indian. There may be some experiences that they had in the past that, trigger something. And, it's just to be mindful of that. So that's kind of like a quick explanation. If you, want a little bit more elaboration, I could talk to you guys like one-on-one. Just gonna get through this. So how do you create your identity or belonging? To answer that question, it has a lot to do with your environment. So the environment that I was raised in, the environment that you create for your kids, your students, that all plays a part in how they hold themselves as they get older. What they're exposed to is how they become more comfortable with what they experience throughout life. So now bringing in Indigenous culture with their schoolwork at such a young age, they're going to be more inclined to look at those the different peoples of the world, even throughout Canada, throughout their hometowns, their cities. They're more inclined to discover, okay, well, I learned about this today, and I want to know what else is there. What else do they do? Who are they, or who's that they? And kind of getting rid of that other that we have, because we're all one and the same right now. Oh, this one was my favorite. So, wondering, is Bannock part of ancient teachings or European influence? Definitely European influence. So we didn't have the flour, we didn't have the sugar, we didn't have the salt, we didn't have any of that. Once we got put onto reservations, that became a primary source that was, left on the reservations for all of the houses to take in. Because of the reservations, we could no longer hunt where we needed to hunt. We were, I guess, situated far from the rivers, in some cases, not all. So we couldn't fish. Or, like today, Akwesasne, where I'm from, Akwesasne is surrounded by 3 major plant industries. You have Alcoa, General Motors, and Domtar. And each one leaked their, I guess, what would it be called? Like not their sewage, but their waste. Yes, thank you. Their chemical waste into our rivers. So now, how the river flows, all of our fish got affected. They all have traces of mercury in them. And we would eat the fish, or no, my grandparents would eat the fish, and then that got passed down to my mother, and I have traces of mercury inside me. And no doubt my grandchildren will have traces of mercury inside them. So then that stopped us from fishing in our own waters, drinking our own waters, even some of the animals, because they're eating the fish. So then it's just like this big web. So we had to turn to the provisions that were provided to us by outsiders. And we did rebrand Bannock or fried bread. We don't call them Indian tacos for nothing. We use that now. You think of Indian tacos and it's like, oh, that's what the natives do. Like they have that at powwows, big social gatherings. And we rebranded it. It's ours, but it had heavy European influence. It being brought here and why we have it today still. So students need to feel what they're hearing, and teachers must nurture this daily. Definitely. And it definitely starts with teachers feeling it first. So the presentations, actually hearing it. Being able to relate to it and kind of knowing the feeling that you're getting while that individual is talking, or individuals. So that when it's time for your students to feel that, you can understand on the same level what they're kind of going through and how to connect to it. So then that puts both of you on the same level. Because as educators, you're still the students learning. You will no doubt be learning from your students in some cases, or in most of the case. Just like, does anybody teach Indigenous students? Okay, so those Indigenous students, sometimes based on their household, based on other classes, whatever it may be. They always have something to say. So it's like they may have something to teach you just as much as you have something to teach them. So then it becomes a dance. And the whole education system is one dance. It's like a waltz. I think I used that term on Friday. It's like a waltz that teachers and students kind of do. The steps that you take forward are the ones that the student has to mimic. But when the student turns to lead, you're also following because you're taking what they're giving. So then it becomes that whole equality, and you're able to connect with them on a different level than what's been taught to you before. And then that just helps in the connection and the family thing. So, yeah. There was another one. Oh. There's a couple of them. So how to build my knowledge and comfort level in order to confidently teach more about the culture and teachings. That one kind of coincides with, did this shut off? Hello? I think it did. Can you guys all hear me if I, okay, that works. My hands are getting sweaty holding that. So with this one kind of coincides with, there was another one. I can't find it. Anyways, it's really up to you to take that initiative and to be able to look at your different resources. So as Gail kind of mentioned, that UCDSB has cultural advisors on hand for you to reach out to. But depending on your locations, but also depending on your network, being able to reach out and do the investigating yourself and do the digging and looking at what's out there on the internet, but where you can go to collect that the oral tradition or the oral side of our teachings. Because not everything that we talk about orally is going to be on the internet. And that's just kind of the way we've always done things, passing down generation to generation at the dinner table, around a campfire. It's easy that way, and you get a feeling out of it. You're not forced to sit there and to read, one page after another of something that, can be very dry. So yeah, and being able to kind of, I guess, for yourself, differentiating between what may be romanticized about us, and having I don't want to say having the courage, but not being afraid to ask the questions that you want to ask, not being afraid to, ask one of us, ask anybody nearby, what could this mean? What would this mean? Is it all right if I do it this way? And not feeling that shame or that guilt that, oh, well, I should already know this. Because now in this at this time, what's happening is the indigenous culture and everything surrounding it, it's becoming less of a taboo. I mean, it's being incorporated into our school systems. So it's a really big step forward. And as teachers, it's also taking that step forward to being able to ask the questions that you feel is, appropriate.
I'm going to piggyback on that from just an experience that I had. 2 years ago, I had the Indigenous portfolio. I was naive in my teachings around Indigenous education. We were at the TRC and we were in the Lanners drumming circle was performing. They invited me into the circle and the gentleman beside me was talking about his drum. And I reached over and touched the leather on the drum. And so Francine, who was the lead, explained to me about the importance of the drum, and it's very spiritual to the drummer, and you would not just touch a drum without talking to them first about asking for permission to touch their drum. So there was my teaching in the moment. I made a mistake, but so what? I made a mistake, but I learned so much about the culture through that mistake. So sometimes as educators, we're very nervous about doing it wrong, but it's like our students. Do we ever expect our students to be perfect in everything they do? That's where the learning happens. And I can assure you within 10 minutes, the drum was in my hand, I was playing the drum, and I was really experiencing the experience. But I would have never had that if I hadn't made the mistake of touching the drum. So it's okay to ask questions and make mistakes and learn through those questions, just like we want our students to do. It's what you then do with that information once you have it that's really important.
The most important is to access resources that are by Indigenous authors. On our VLC, there is a section, and we'll share that out with you today, how to access it, that has all kinds of resources that are vetted, and they're by Indigenous voices and Indigenous authors. And as Ariana said, you have to dig in and do your own learning. One opportunity we have available to you is if you'd like to join a virtual book club that we ran twice last year. We had 120 people so far participate in, called Speaking Our Truth, and it's a book by an Indigenous author. And we will make that available to you. Everybody who participates gets a free copy of the book, and we just ask you to make one comment and pose one question on the discussion group. So please take advantage of the opportunities that are out there and take advantage of our advisors that we have available to us.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you have one more you wanted to do? You go right ahead.
Kind of. As I said, like there's so many good ones.
And Ariana will be here all day, so at lunchtime, continue to ask questions.
But this one was a really interesting one. So, how to include Indigenous perspective without making them other. So, really, it's as with anything new that a student learns. It doesn't become other. They can adopt that way of thinking. So, because some people say that we're very spiritual. So, we give thanks to our earth, our creator. There's no solid in stone perspective that we all kind of force on everybody. It's if a student likes what they hear, then it's then they're embracing it, and it's more of a, you have that good heart, that good mind. It's there's 3 principles that we live by, and those 3 principles kind of teach us to live a life that's inclusive of everybody. So kind of erasing that other, well, it starts with educators, not just teaching it like, okay, today we're going to learn about this, and then once we're done with that, we're going to leave it there, and then we're going to return back to here. Okay, it's not like that. Learning Indigenous culture, it's picking and choosing from different things and then being able to weave something that a student can fully understand and kind of grasp and embrace it in their everyday life. And they go home and it's like, oh wow, this is what I did today. And then being able to relate it if they go outside. That type of inclusivity with our culture and our teachings, our traditions. So there's a lot, but I think I'll end it there.